Dear listeners, as we gather for this episode of Hikes and Mics, our hearts are heavy with the recent events unfolding in Southern California. The devastating wildfires have ravaged beloved landscapes, destroyed homes, and most tragically claimed lives. To all those affected, the families mourning loved ones, individuals who lost their homes, and communities facing the aftermath, we extend our deepest sympathies and unwavering support. The magnitude of this disaster is profound. In these trying times, it's essential to come together as a community. Many of you have reached out asking how you can assist those impacted. Please check out the episode show notes to learn more about how you can help out the individuals and communities impacted by these fires. To those on the front lines, the brave firefighters, first responders, and volunteers, your courage and dedication do not go unnoticed. Your tireless efforts to protect our communities and natural spaces are deeply appreciated. In the face of such adversity, it's natural to feel overwhelmed. Remember, it's okay to seek support, lean on one another, and take time to heal. Our trails and mountains have always been symbols of resilience and strength. Together as a community, we will navigate this challenging path and emerge stronger. Stay safe, take care of each other, and let's continue to support those in need during this critical time. Welcome everyone to the Hikes and Mics podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey, connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the United States and beyond. Throughout these winter months, we've had the privilege of conversing with remarkable individuals. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. In this episode, we're joined by Laura Clark, also known as Wild Wanderer, a mountaineer, author, and solo adventurer who has summited over 600 peaks above 13,000 feet. Laura shares her journey from hiking in SoCal to conquering Colorado's toughest 13ers and 14ers, the lessons she's learned along the way, and her passion for inspiring more people, especially solo hikers, to embrace the mountains. We also dive into her craziest trail encounters, from marmots stowing away in her truck to surviving unexpected snowstorms. Plus, she reveals insights from her book, Wild Wanderer, Soloing Colorado's 200 Highest Peaks, and her mission to help hikers stay safe through her trip reports and wilderness first aid training. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Laura. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. I have a really exciting guest with me today. Her name is Laura, and she's going to be sharing about her experiences with the outdoors and mountaineering. Laura, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We always like to start off by asking our guests to share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me on today. I'm really excited to get to talk to you. My name is Laura, but my trail name is Wild Wanderer. I was born in Southern California, and I moved to Colorado in my mid-20s. I have 5 kids. They're aged 21, 22, 24, 25, and 26. And I love everything to do with the outdoors. So from hiking to backpacking and camping, fishing, canyoneering, snowshoeing, climbing, all that stuff. If it's outdoor related, I want to be involved. Also a big fan of travel and love taking road trips. And I like to high point as well. And high pointing is pretty much making it to the highest point in a state or in a county or city or something like that. So when I'm not climbing in Colorado, I'm usually in another state trying to get to their highest point. And I'm also an author and a mountaineer. And I've summited over 600 unique peaks above 13,000 feet solo. And I've done hundreds more with friends. So I love to hike.
Yeah, Laura. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of those stories on some of those peaks that you've been able to summit. Now, I did want to ask you, because I feel like the community is growing when it comes to high pointing. I feel like it used to be like a subset of hiking and backpacking, but now it's really become its own movement. Is that something that you've noticed over the last couple of years, where the high pointing community is really starting to take off?
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of that just has to come from all the information that's out there right now. A lot of people before wouldn't even known about it. And it comes across on our feeds, our social media feeds, that, hey, there's something you can do, and you get excited about it. High pointing tends to be easy. There are harder high points, but it's fun to give yourself when you're on vacation or you have a free day to go, hey, this is a goal. I can go summit that and hit the high point of this place. And then it becomes a checklist and you just want to get them all. It's really easy to get drug into that kind of a passion.
And I did want to touch base because you mentioned that you grew up in SoCal. How was the hiking scene in and around SoCal growing up?
Growing up, it was great when I was younger and didn't have to do things like get permits or anything like that. As I started hiking the taller peaks. I'm a mountaineer, so I love peaks. In Southern California, there's San Gorgonio, there's Saddleback Mountain, there's San Jacinto, and there's Mount Baldy. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. And I really got put off by the permit system. This was like in the early 2000s, when in order to get a permit, you had to apply for it by mailing something in. And you had to get a permit not just to hike, but if you wanted to spend the night, or if you wanted to build a fire, or if you wanted to park. And it got really frustrating because I might get a permit to park, or I might get a permit to spend the night, but I wouldn't get a permit to hike. And that just frustrated me. Now, there's a lot of other hikes that you can do, but I'm a mountaineer and I wanted to climb mountains. And I was really turned off by the hiking scene because the stuff I wanted to do was regulated. And not only that, but I had to months in advance apply for these permits. So 3 months in advance or 6 months in advance, I'd have to apply for it. And I didn't know what the weather was going to be on that date. I could block it out on my calendar, but if the weather was terrible, it's just not smart to go. So I'd lose out on all that time of planning in order to do it.
I think a lot of us that are interested in the lottery system to get some of these hard to get permits, at least for me, I can speak for myself. The next couple weeks, my calendar is just full of reminders about the upcoming permitting system and lotteries that are upcoming. And like you said, I think a common one is Half Dome. You can get the permit to summit, but in order to camp, that's a different permit, that's a different lottery. And it just becomes a difficult way to navigate in order to do the type of trip that you'd want to do.
Yeah, especially if you're coming from out of state or something and you have to book flights or rental car or place to stay. It makes it infinitely more difficult to say no to a hike that you should say no to because the weather's bad, but you've spent all this money to get there. And it's always a personal decision whether or not you climb these mountains. But I think a lot of people make bad choices because of the permit system. Now, I do believe a permit system needs to be implemented. I just think we should maybe have more options. You've got a 2-week period instead of a 1-day period.
And you're now based out of Colorado, which I think throughout the world, and not just the United States, I think Colorado is an iconic state for outdoor recreation and hiking. How was it moving from SoCal to then Colorado and its unique hiking scene?
Okay, so I loved the change moving to Colorado. I'm a mountaineer, so we have well over 600 peaks above 13,000 feet here, and there's tons of hiking. If you don't want to do a peak, there's a lot of other hiking. The permit system is slowly being introduced into some of our more iconic areas, the places that people want to go all the time, but there's still thousands of trails to choose from to just go and hike. I absolutely loved that. The higher elevation means it's colder, but it is manageable. And there's a lot more opportunities to disperse camp, to just be someplace and camp and not have to worry about having a ton of permits. But probably my favorite part about being in Colorado is that I see a ton of wildlife when I'm out. I know if I'm going out, I'm going to see something. I see bears or mountain lions, bighorn sheep, marmots, pikas, elk, mountain goats, deer, you name it. If I'm going on a hike, I'm going to see something. And I absolutely love that about Colorado. I love the wildlife. I love being able to see that.
You mentioned that you were able to summit some high points in California. Was there any adjustment period for you having to move to Colorado and deal with its elevation change?
You know what? A lot of people have trouble when they go from low elevation to high elevation. I didn't seem to have that problem, but I have a really robust cardio routine. So I think that might have helped. Living here for a while before I really started doing the higher peaks probably helped. I live at 7,000 feet, so that helps a little bit. Our peaks are 14,000, but just where I live every day, it's a little bit higher. Now, I know my family comes to visit and I've got to have them drinking a ton of water and they always have headaches and just at my house, not necessarily the hiking. Because my family is from Southern California. They're used to sea level and they have a hard time when they come here, but I didn't seem to personally.
That's one thing that always blows my mind is not just Colorado, but other places in the Southwest. It's just the elevation some of these towns sit on is, what most of not even Washington. I don't think we have any mountain pass that's at that level. So yeah, I imagine people that aren't used to even 7,000 feet have some issues. But we're recording this, Laura, at the beginning of 2025, and Colorado is known for its fall season. You guys have some beautiful aspen groves. How was your fall hiking season? And did you have any memorable destinations or hikes that you can share with us?
Fall is absolutely fantastic in Colorado. It doesn't matter where you go, you get to see the fall colors change, and it's phenomenal. It is beautiful, and I absolutely love living here because of that. But what I love most about fall is that's when I see most of the animals outside when I'm hiking. So I probably saw about 30 moose this fall. You've got the changing colors, so everything is gold, and the moose are a deep brown, if not a black color, depending on what kind they are. So they're really easy to spot, and I got to see them when I was hiking, and I just love that. I love wildlife. I love seeing that kind of stuff. But I do have a memorable adventure that happened on one of my trips this fall, and it all started at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when I go hiking, a lot of times I will sleep in my truck at the trailhead. The back of my truck is set up for me to sleep in, and it's got a bed, and it's got a stove, and it's got a heater, and I'm nice and comfy in there. So I'll try to get to where I need to be so I can start a hike early, because a lot of my hikes will be 20, 30 miles in a day, and the earlier I start, the better it goes. So I've been sleeping in the back of my truck, and I got out at 2 o'clock in the morning to start my hike. And the first thing I always do when I get out of my truck is I shine my flashlight all around. And I do this because I've been surprised by animals. There'll be raccoons or there'll be deer, or I've had a mountain lion one time, and I like to see what's going on before I just hop out of my truck and start hiking around at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this time, I jumped out of my truck and I shone my flashlight all around and I put it under the truck. And underneath my truck, I saw a porcupine, a pine marten, which is like a weasel, and a marmot all underneath my truck. It was like something out of a Disney movie or a really bad joke. What the heck are these animals doing all together, and why are they here? I'm thinking to myself, okay, great. These animals under my truck spell trouble because they like to chew wires in the truck and they'll cause a whole bunch of problems. Usually I hear them wrestling around when I'm sleeping at night and it wakes me up, but for some reason this time I didn't. They weren't really dangerous animals, so I shoot them away and got in my truck and turned it on. I did that kind of because I get in there to warm up and get dressed before I start my hike. I turned my truck on and all the lights on my dashboard are flashing. I immediately knew what happened. Either all or one of these little varmints had chewed through the wires underneath my truck, and they had cut stuff going on in my truck, and it didn't work the same. And at this point, I was 15 miles off a four-wheel drive dirt road, and if my four-wheel drive wasn't working, which one of the flashing lights was four-wheel drive, I knew that 2 o'clock in the morning is probably the best time to drive down this road, because when you're trying to pass other vehicles, it's a narrow shelf road. It's really hard to pass other vehicles, and if I didn't have four-wheel drive, trying to pass another vehicle would have been just torturous. So I resigned my hiking plans for the day, and I drove to the nearest dealership to try and fix my truck. And that was 4 hours away because I'm off this road and it'll take 2 or 3 hours to drive these roads to get there. So it was going to take that long to drive out and then find a place that would help me with my truck. So I get to the nearest dealership and I told them what happened, and they took a look under the hood and under the vehicle and said, honestly, this is going to take 3 to 4 weeks to fix. So I was shocked. I've never had anybody tell me it's going to take that long to do it, but they were adamant. I knew I had to stay there. However, I've had this happen before. This isn't the first time this has happened. You'd think I would have already learned, but the wires just needed to be spliced and put back together and then bound with rat tape. So normally I rat tape all my vehicles before I head out in the middle of nowhere because rodents tend to do this to you, but I hadn't done it. This is my fault. So I called around to every dealership within 5 hours of where I was, and everybody told me the same thing: 3 to 4 weeks to fix your truck. I decided instead to just head to a 2-wheel drive trailhead that was only 45 minutes away. I figured at 7 hours home or 45 minutes here, I'm not going to lose out on a day of hiking. So I'm going to do that, right? I drive to the next trailhead, little upset. My hiking day was shot, and I just sat in the front of my truck because it was raining, and I was researching what can I do tomorrow? What can I hike tomorrow? Because I love to hike and I can't not hike. As I'm sitting there, I hear this scratching coming from inside my truck. And it's not really inside, but it's underneath inside. It's not in my topper or in the cab. It's underneath my truck, and there's just scratching going on. I kept hearing the noise, something scratching at the walls, and it sounded bigger than a mouse or a rat and a bit frantic, like it was trying to get out. I got out of my truck to see what was going on, and the noise stopped. And then the noise started again. And I sat there and like, something is stuck inside my truck. I see a Forest Service truck drive by, and so I flag this guy down. He's a ranger, and I say, hey, do you know any tricks for getting something out of my truck? There's something in there. There's definitely something in there. And I could tell by the look he gave me, he just didn't believe me. He's, no, you're crazy. There's nothing inside your truck. And he sat there for 5 minutes, and whatever it was inside my truck didn't make any noise. And so he looks at me, smiles at me, and he says, yeah, just give it time, honey. And he drove away. He obviously thought I was crazy. And of course, as soon as he drove away, the noises started again. Something was obviously in there trying to get out. I started banging on the tires to make noise, like maybe I could scare this thing out, whatever it was. And I did that and it went silent again. But as I'm watching my truck, I could see this little face poke out above my back tire. Like it was just sitting there looking at me, and it looked like a porcupine. And honestly, that would have made sense, right? Because I'd seen a porcupine under my truck that morning, and the pine marten and the marmot. So I was worried it was a porcupine. And if it was, I wasn't going to put my hands anywhere near the truck to help it out because those guys have quills, right? They start having quills. Eventually, it started trying other options. It wasn't just in the wheel well. It started moving over the truck. I could see a little tail sticking out. So at that point, I didn't really think it was a porcupine, but it was trying to make its way out. So I just decided to give it time. And eventually it did. And when it did, it was a marmot. He dropped out of the back of my truck and sat there and looked very confused, like he had no idea where he was. He obviously had no idea where he was, and he was trying to take time to think. So it took a little too much time for me. And when it started to look like he was going to climb back inside my truck, I shooed him away, just yelled at him and got him to leave the underside of my truck because I didn't want him going back up in there. He ran off into the trees and went back to doing what he was doing, and I went back doing what I was doing. And then as I'm sitting there, I noticed him just sitting staring back at me. And then he started walking towards my truck again. And I got worried that he tried to slip in later that night. Before he could get under my truck, I just drove down the road for about a mile, giving him space for my vehicle because he seemed to really want to get back in. 15 minutes later, after I'd driven a mile up this road, I looked in my side mirror, and that little booger was running up the road towards my truck.
Oh my God.
Okay. It was like he thought my truck was some sort of portal or something that he'd escaped from the wrong side. Like he went in one way and came out the wrong way. Maybe if he jumped back in, he'd get back to wherever it was he came from. I don't know what he was thinking, but he wanted my truck. So I laughed to myself because I realized at that point that he'd been stuck in my truck at the repair shop and hadn't been noticed. He'd been in there. I'd driven a good 6-7 hours and he'd been inside my truck, and I was now hundreds of miles away from the trailhead he came to. And I'm sorry, little guy, but don't go up in the middle of my truck. I drove another 5 miles away and he didn't seem to follow me. And then my truck was safe for the weekend. So the moral of the story is rat tape your vehicle before you head to remote trailheads so that they don't want to chew the wires and get in there and cause all sorts of damage. And I felt bad for the little guy, but I wasn't going to pick him up and carry him.
Oh my gosh, that is wild. I've been hearing more and more, especially of marmots that are starting to chew through wire or they're looking for coolant of some sort. Is there other ways besides like rat tape that you can protect your vehicle? Because I think some people do a tarp system in Kings Canyon where they'll drive over a tarp and then wrap their engine bay with the tarp.
I've seen that in a lot of places. I actually go hiking and see people do it. It seems like a lot of work for me, and they can just chew through that if they want to. The rat tape actually has stuff in it that keeps them from wanting to chew through it, and it works just like duct tape. You bring it in, it's expensive. It's $50 a roll, and Honda makes it, and you can get it and put it on there. It's just much easier just to rat tape your wires and not have to deal with doing the whole system, figuring out how you're going to tarp up your vehicle every time. And looking at it, it just doesn't seem like that's going to keep them out because there's nothing but a little tarp to keep them through, and they chew through those things like nothing.
And Laura, I got to ask, were you able to just splice the wires that were chewed and rat tape them and then your truck was good to go?
Yeah. And in fact, like I said, this isn't my first time. It was my bad. I didn't learn the first time. And this was a new truck that I had gotten and I hadn't rat taped the wires. But the last time I went in, they just spliced them together and put everything together. But this time they said the damage was so bad that they wanted to replace everything underneath. And I was able to find somebody that could just splice them and make it work again. But it's expensive to get it done, and it's time consuming, and not having a reliable vehicle is dangerous.
It's becoming more and more prevalent. I'm hearing not just in California, but now Colorado. Our marmots up here in Washington, they like to cork on people's trekking poles. So if you leave your trekking poles out, they might eat through the cork, but I'm hoping they're not getting through to the wires just yet.
Yeah, I've had the cork thing happen a couple times when I'm trying to rock scramble or climb up something and just have to leave my trekking poles for half an hour. I come back and they're decimated. Those little buggers love it.
I think a lot of people, when they think of Colorado, they think of the Rockies, but Colorado is so much more than just the Rocky Mountains. I love the section going up to Wyoming and even down south. What are some of your favorite hikes and trails in and around the state?
In Colorado, you could probably do a different hike every day for over 10 years and never run out of places to hike. We have tons of places to hike. I am based out of Colorado Springs. So when I'm at home, especially in the wintertime, most of my hikes are local because that's where I'm based out of. So I've done Pikes Peak over 36 times, and that's always a great hike. I would do it when my kids were in school. I do that one on Fridays because that was the one day I got off work a week. And that one's a long one. It's about 26 miles with 7,500 feet of elevation gain. That's round trip. But I could do that and be back in time for them to get out of school. And that's a great hike. It's an iconic hike. It's very similar to Whitney. It's all a class 1 trail the entire way. And you go through a bunch of different zones. And that's a nice one. Some iconic places in Colorado to hike, if you're not looking for that, are like Garden of the Gods. And that's a fun one because there's a resident herd of bighorn sheep there. So if you're out there, you have a pretty good chance of seeing them, and there's no elevation gain. You're walking on nice, easy trails, and there's no cost to get in, which is really nice. No cost to park or anything. Outside of La Junta, In Colorado, we have Picket Wire Canyon, where you can hike to see old dinosaur tracks from a migration route. Not many people know that one, but it's a great hike. And if you go in the fall, you get to experience the tarantula migration, where you'll just see hundreds of tarantulas hiking with you at the same time. And it sounds scary, but tarantulas are actually pretty peaceful. And it's really cool to see that happening.
Is that a particular month in the fall, Laura, or does it vary depending on temperature?
Yeah, it varies depending on temperature. It's usually September to November. October, you're almost guaranteed to see them.
So you can get some fall colors in and then also get some tarantula migration in during the fall.
Yeah, and you get to see some old cemeteries from the 1800s and then the dinosaur tracks, which is the ultimate goal, to see that.
And what part of the state are the dinosaur tracks in?
They're more in the eastern part of the state, so a little south of Colorado Springs and to the east.
Laura, we can't talk about Colorado without mentioning 13ers and 14ers, and you've had some incredible accomplishments under your belt, one being you're the first woman to solo summit all the Colorado 14ers and Centennial Peaks. What kind of motivated you to pursue the goal, and then what were some of the memorable and challenging moments during those climbs?
Okay, so I have a type A personality, so I like checklists. So that's the obvious answer for why I wanted to hike these peaks. But honestly, I feel at home in the mountains and when I'm hiking. So if something is going on in my life I'm trying to work through, I've got a problem at work or something that's going on with my kids, after going on a hike, it's given me a lot of time to just think about how I'm going to handle it and do it the right way. I can go through all my anger or frustration and then come out going, nope, this is really the right way to do it. And that's what I'm going to do. So hiking gives me mental clarity. As to hiking all the 13ers and 14ers, after I finished the 14ers, I told myself I was just going to do the Centennials and stop. And so the Centennials are the highest 100 peaks in the state, but I didn't want to because it was so much fun. So I said, okay, I'm just going to do the bicentennials and then I'm going to stop. And that's the 200 highest peaks in the state. And then I was just enjoying myself so much that I figured I'd just go ahead and hike them all. And a lot of it was because I just got so much mental clarity after doing it. Hiking is really just a personal goal, and I'm very goal driven, and I love checklists and I love new things. So the same hike over and over again, like I said, I've done Pikes Peak over 3 dozen times. It's a great hike, but I wanted to see something different. I didn't want to say the same marmots I saw every time or the exact same view. I wanted different views and different stuff, and Colorado just has a ton of that to offer.
And, hiking that many peaks, did you notice like a growth in your mountaineering and hiking experience, or I guess potential, that you didn't know you had when you first started some of these challenges and lists?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing I learned was I didn't know what I didn't know. So I go out to do some peaks that I thought I could do and then realized, oh, I really need to learn rock climbing. I really need to learn how to set up ropes in order to do this one. Personal growth, I'd take time off and I'd go to a rock climbing gym and I'd find friends and I'd say, hey, can you teach me how to set up ropes? Can I learn how to do stuff? I did bouldering. I had to practice. I couldn't just go out there and do a lot of stuff. I'd try and then realized, okay, this isn't my skill set. I need to abandon this hike and improve my skill set and then come back to it.
Oh, so it definitely helped you and evolve and expand your outdoor recreation experiences by having you learn climbing and rope tying and doing other outdoor activities to help you reach some of those summits, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And one of the main differences between California and Colorado is in Colorado, we have a lot more snow and ice in these mountains. And just learning how to travel on snow and ice and avalanche danger and what that entails and how to stay away from it or how to get out of it was a huge learning curve.
One thing I'm interested in hearing, Laura, because I know that you've mentioned you can get an early start in order to summit in a day. Would you say the majority of the peaks that you were able to summit were achievable in a day, or did some of them take some backpacking in order to summit?
I would say probably 75% are achievable in a day of what I've done, and the rest are backpacking related. And they're not just easy backpacking. It's 2.5 miles on a 4-wheel drive dirt road that's sketchy. If you're not really good at driving 4-wheel drive, it's sketchy, and you're going to be scraping up the bottom of your truck, and you're going to be driving across rivers and all sorts of stuff.
Your Colorado roads, especially the higher you go, the sketchier they can be.
Yeah, and that's just getting to where you can drive your vehicle. And then after that, it's usually 15 miles into base camp where you set up your tent, and then you do as many peaks as you can in however much time you have. And then usually those are between 5 and 10 miles from base camp. And then your last day, you got to hike the 15 miles out and then drive the 2.5 miles out. And then where I'm from, I live probably 7 hours, maybe 8 from some of these places. So it's 8 hours to get there, 2.5 miles off a dirt road, and then 15 miles to base camp. And then I get to start hiking. It's a real time commitment to get to some of these, especially the ones I have left. I don't have many left, but most of the ones I have left, it's the time commitment because I still have a full-time job. So I can't take 2 or 3 weeks off, or a lot of people that like to mountaineer have summers off, teachers or something like that, and they get the summer off. I get 3 days. So making that work takes a lot of adjustment.
Yeah, but like 75% of the peaks are achievable in a day. That's pretty good. That leaves a lot of options for folks to choose if they're looking for a day hike in order to reach some of those summits. And one great thing that you're doing for the community, Laura, is you have this great website with tons of resources. It's wildwanderertripreports.com, and it features detailed trip reports from your hikes and your summits. What kind of inspired you to start documenting these journeys, and how has it been sharing your experiences with the community, especially the high pointers and mountaineers?
Okay, so writing is something that I've just always done. I got my first journal in elementary school and kept a journal every single day through high school. And then I transitioned to keeping journals online when that kind of became a thing, like a blog. And I wrote these things mainly for me about what I was doing every day and things I was doing. So when I started hiking, I just documented my hikes for personal use because it was what I had done. But then I got messages from other hikers who found my information useful, and I found out what they were looking for and started tailoring my trip reports to them. So I started to realize that they were interested in what I was writing because there wasn't a lot of information out there, and then trying to make my reports more useful. At this point, I think I've gotten pretty good at writing trip reports, and I know what people are looking for. They're looking for pictures, they're looking for directions, they're looking for mileage, they're looking for all that kind of stuff. And I'll set up cairns and stuff on routes that are really difficult to figure out the route on. And now at this point, I have people contact me almost daily about my routes, and several times a year, search and rescue will ask me for help because I've been to a lot of remote areas that people seldom go to, but that tends to be where people get in trouble. And I love helping people, and I answer every single one of the questions I get because my main goal at this point is to get more people outdoors and to keep them safe in doing so. And one cool thing about the site and having all this information is that people will contact me, and I've met some really wonderful people that I've had amazing adventures with. You find out their background and they want to do something, but they don't want to do it alone. I'm like, hey, let's go. Let's do this. Let's have some fun.
That's awesome, Laura. And the great thing is the trip reports are free, right? They're not behind a paywall. Like, they're accessible to anybody who's interested in learning about some of the routes that you've taken, right?
Absolutely. And I want to keep it that way. And my main reason behind that is I do a lot of research online, but I just have this thing about paying for sites. So all the research I get before I go is from a free site. So I think it would really be poor form for me to charge people for information when I get my information for free. I just really want to keep people safe out there. So yeah, it'll always be free for people to go look it up.
You've also channeled that passion for writing in becoming an author. Your book, Wild Wanderer, Summiting Colorado's 200 Highest Peaks, came out, and I'm always interested in hearing the origin story of authors and how the seed got planted to write a book, because it's quite an endeavor, especially when you're writing about your own personal experiences. How did the book come to be?
Okay, so I never really intended to write a book, but I kept posting stories from my hikes because something exciting happens on every hike you take, or something new happens on every hike you take. So the more you go on hikes, the more stories you have to tell. And people kept asking me over and over again, when are you going to write a book? You've got so many great stories. When are you going to do it? And as I started accomplishing more and more, I realized what I had gone through personally in my life and then in my hiking journey could actually probably help people, mainly people who were afraid to start hiking, especially solo. So I'm hoping my book encourages everyone to get out there and hike. And this isn't like a guidebook. I know I've got my website that has guides on it. That's not what this is. This is stories depicting my journey from being a single mom, just wanting to get out and hike, to have my own time, and then eventually transitioning into actually becoming a mountaineer. And it's got wildlife encounters, stories about fighting against Mother Nature, falling into frozen lakes, and even some real life ghost stories in there, things that have happened to me on the trail that are just absolutely crazy. And all these stories are true, and they're from my experiences. And anybody can pick up this book and just enjoy the journey. It's not a real intellectual journey. There is growth through it, but it's just a bunch of fun stories of stuff that happens when you're hiking.
Oh, I'm definitely going to pick a copy up because I recently finished, based on a recommendation from one of our previous guests, it was about the deaths of Yellowstone National Park, and it was about the stories of unfortunate incidences that happened in Yellowstone. And I love hearing about the history, especially different tales about different trails. So I'll definitely be picking up your book And I'll be sure to not just put your book in the episode show notes, but also a link to your website so people can check it out.
Awesome. And I think I know the book you're talking about. I think it's Death in Yellowstone, and there's another one, Death in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
That's the best way to learn how to not screw up or how to keep yourself out of danger, is realizing how other people got into danger and going, that's not going to happen to me. So when you get out there, you know what the dangers are, and you're like, nah, okay, I'm a little bit smarter now. I'm not making that choice. But yeah, that great series. Yeah.
I'll have to check out the Grand Canyon. I didn't know about that one. Yeah, it definitely made me think of, oh man, if I was in that situation, how would I approach it? And you learn from mistakes, and hopefully people can learn from those stories. And you've already touched base on this, Laura, but you've been able to be a great resource for hikers from not just in Colorado, but from across the world. What guidance would you offer to individuals who are looking to embark on solo hiking or even maybe mountaineering this year?
Probably the most frequent question I get is, aren't you afraid to hike solo? That's usually the first thing people ask me when we're talking about my book or something like that. And you know what? The more you hike by yourself and nothing actually happens to you when you're hiking, the easier it is to hike solo. So my advice is to get out there and do it. And if you're really afraid of something happening to you, go to a popular area first where there's tons of people, so that if something did happen, at least you've got a backup with people being there. And then remember to use a trekking pole. So your trekking pole is your first line of defense against 2- and 4-legged creatures. If you need to use it like a bat, you can. I've never actually had to, but it's always in the back of my mind that I have a weapon just in my hand if I ever actually needed it. And then don't wear earphones or headphones and listen to music. Don't do that. You want to be aware of your surroundings so that you know what's going on. And to me, I don't understand why people do that. I want to hear nature. I want to be out there for the solitude. I don't want something pounding in my ears all the time. I realize I might not be on the higher end of that. A lot of people love to listen to podcasts when they're hiking, and I say, go do that. But when you're first starting out hiking solo, that's probably not a good idea. You want to know what to look for. And then I got to say, I've been on thousands of hikes solo, and I'm still fine. Get out there and do it. Get out there and do it. And you don't know what you can do until you try.
Yeah. And I think to this day, my favorite statistic has been like when it comes to the dangers of hiking, the biggest danger is like you actually driving to the trailhead.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Once you reach the trailhead, the possibilities of something happening are drastically lower. It's just the actual driving. And it's not even part of hiking. It's just driving there. That's the most dangerous part.
Yeah. And what I'm doing at this point in the middle of nowhere, it takes a lot of work to get out there. And there just aren't a lot of crazy people out there. There's animals, and I've had a ton of animal encounters, but not a lot that have been dangerous.
You've been doing something really special for 20 plus years, and that's being a volunteer with the Girl Scouts. How has it been helping and mentoring the next generation of hikers and mountaineers?
Like you said, I've been a Girl Scout leader for a long time, since 2003, and teaching girls from kindergarten through high school. I also teach leaders survival skills and stuff, but my main focus is I really love working with the girls. And it is amazing to watch them grow and become independent and confident. My troops were mainly high adventure troops, so we go hiking and camping and backpacking all the time. That's what they wanted to do. That's what we were doing. And one time I had a small group of girls who were all either freshmen or sophomores in high school, and they wanted to summit Pikes Peak on a backpacking trip. We decided to do it in August, and August is usually pretty warm, but we got caught in a freak snowstorm. Mountains tend to make their own weather, and this can happen a lot at 14,000 feet. They just do. It's not predicted. It just ends up happening for some reason. Now, my girls were prepared for this backpacking trip, and they were prepared for snow, even in August, but they ended up saving the lives of 7 other people that weekend who were hiking and were not prepared because the weather wasn't predictive. So they assessed and treated these people for hypothermia and altitude sickness, and they started campfires because these other people weren't able to do it to keep them warm. They shared their shelter, they shared their sleeping bags and food with them, and they ended up receiving the Red Cross Hometown Hero Award and the Spirit of the Springs Award for what they had done. They were featured in magazines and stuff like that. And why I'm telling you this is that it's really cool that they use their skills to save lives. And this experience is something that no one can ever take away from them. It gave them confidence that they could use their skills in a real life situation. And personally, I know I helped make that happen. And that's huge for me. Like, my mentoring these girls put them in a position where they could use their skills and grow as people. Many of these girls right now are in college and beyond, and they're getting married and they're having kids and they're introducing their kids to the outdoors. So it's like the legacy moves on. Like, you teach one generation and it moves on to the next generation. And I still volunteer teaching outdoor survival skills to scouts. I just started this year with a new troop, a group of 6th graders, and I'm really excited to take them on their first trip this summer and watch them learn how to do things for themselves, and I'm excited to see them grow. And it's just really empowering to be a part of that. And I know it's empowering for them to be able to start a campfire on their own, or set up a tent on their own, or do animal tracking on their own, or figure a route out on their own. It's just a neat experience.
Yeah, that's awesome and amazing, Laura. I imagine each time you get a chance to spend time with a new group of kids, it's a really rewarding experience to be able to teach them skills that have been really beneficial to you, and you've seen it be a benefit to them.
Oh, and to see them get off their phones and be excited, like just to be excited without needing to use their cell phones, and being excited about nature and getting out there and hiking and realizing, oh, I can eat that plant, or I can't eat that plant, or that's what animal track that is, or this is how I know this is a good campsite. It's really neat to see them doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, see their growth and potential. Laura, one of the regular segments that we do here on the podcast is doing a deep dive into our guest's Instagram feed or website and ask them about a particular post or a reel or story, and talking about teaching survival skills. One of the things that really caught my attention is you're also a Red Cross first aid and wilderness first aid trainer. And for me personally, in 2025, I'm hoping to do a wilderness first aid course to be able to help in situations, since I'm leading hikers with my hiking club. And you just never know when you'll come across somebody in need on the trail, or if you end up getting yourself in a situation where you need to practice first aid. Can you share with us maybe the key difference between the regular first aid that some of us may have received on the job, between that and the wilderness first aid that you teach?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, in order to take wilderness first aid, you already need to have a valid first aid certificate. Wilderness first aid works on top of the basic skills that you should have already learned from your first aid course, and it teaches you how to plan for the unexpected. When help is often hours, if not days away, in a remote environment, how to care for a patient. You learn how to assess and keep the victim stable, both mentally and physically, because those are two separate things, but both very important to keeping your patient healthy and keeping them stable until help arrives, with whatever it is you have in your pack. So you're not going to have a full med kit in your pack. Most people don't hike with that. Most people don't get into trouble with a full med kit. It'd be great if you did, but how much does that weigh? You're just not going to have it. It can take search and rescue a long time to get to an injured or stranded hiker, because most search and rescues are made up of volunteers who need to be contacted first and then gathered together, form a plan, and then find a way to get to the victim. And this is usually done by hiking in. And sometimes there's helicopters or something that come in, but it takes a long time to get this to happen. So it's important to have these skills to keep them stabilized. And then it could even take them longer, depending on how long the hike is in, or the weather could prevent them from getting in for a day or two. Basically, wilderness first aid teaches you how to work with what you have on hand to treat a medical emergency in remote areas, and hopefully keep that person or yourself stable until they can evacuate you and get you out.
And Laura, being a trainer, who would you recommend take this wilderness course?
I would recommend anyone who goes hiking at any time, or camping or backpacking at all, take a wilderness first aid course. It's usually done in a day. It doesn't take that long, and it'll give you more confidence to help yourself or others if needed. A lot of times nobody has this, and somebody having it is better than nobody. I start teaching wilderness first aid to my Girl Scouts in kindergarten, and we move on from there. So by the time they're in 6th grade, they really have the skills to treat most injuries that are going to happen in the outdoors. Anything from a gunshot wound, not that people are shooting guns, but there's hunters out there sometimes when you're out there, or fire burns, or maybe a hatchet impalement, or broken bones and strains. Like, it goes over all that stuff. And if I have 6th graders that can do it, you guys can do it too. Just keeping somebody safe. And you could save a life by knowing how to stop the bleeding, or what to look for, what signs to look for. And you can keep yourself safe too.
And I think most counties, especially if there's a good outdoor recreation scene, has one, if not multiple providers doing this training. I think for most people, you can just Google search wilderness first aid and the name of your city or county, and you'll be able to find some folks that are providing the course. And like you said, sometimes you can do it in a day, and it could become hugely valuable down the road if you ever come in contact with somebody that has a need for first aid on the trail.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's longer courses too. Depending, I'd say the Red Cross one is the first one to look at. It's a day-long course. If you're really going to be out there mountaineering in the backcountry, there's courses that'll be a week long that'll teach you longer skills. But I would definitely start with Red Cross Wilderness First Aid.
Awesome. And Laura, that was it for the regular questions. These last 3 questions are ones that we ask all our hikers, and really interested in hearing your response to this one, because I feel like a lot of day hikers and even some mountaineers, they have a regular summit routine, or maybe it's the end of the hike routine. For a lot of us, it's the favorite snack or drink. For others it's a moment of zen or the meal afterwards. Is there a regular customer routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or when you make it back out?
Okay, so I'm probably on the outskirts of this question, but I pretty much live out of the back of my truck in the summer months, going from trailhead to trailhead just to summit peaks. So I'm living out of the back of my truck. And if I'm staying at a particular trailhead for a couple days, like maybe there's several peaks I can get from there, and I know I won't be driving, the first thing I do is I get out my journal and I make notes for my trip report, everything about the hike, because when I'm doing 3 or 4 in a row, it's really easy to forget what I've done, and it all meshes together when I actually go to put those trip reports together. And I think I owe it to people to have the right information. And a kind of a caveat to that is I usually do this with a glass of whiskey. So if I'm not driving, the first thing I do when I get back is I pour a glass of whiskey and then I start making notes in the back of my truck.
Nice. And Laura, you're using like pen and paper to take notes? Or are you doing it electronically?
Yeah, no, I do it with pen and paper. I've got a journal that details all my hikes. I have one for every year. Like I said, I used to journal a lot and I still do. And it's just keeping it down there until I can get some internet connection, download all my photos and everything and make it work.
This next question is about your pack list. Is there a luxury item that you tend to pack that falls outside of the essentials?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so the one item that isn't on the 10 essentials, but I bring on every single hike and that is really cumbersome and I shouldn't take, but I need to, is my Canon DSLR camera. So it's big and bulky, but it takes great pictures. And I think I owe it to people to give them a good trip report with good pictures. And you'd think just take one with your cell phone. But I take between 200 and 500 pictures of every hike. I take a ton of pictures every time. And I've got Renaud's. I can't take off my gloves in order to take pictures. So I need something big and bulky that I can work while wearing gloves at the same time. And it's a lot of extra weight, but I think it's worth it.
And is that something that you're clipping onto a strap, Laura, or are you packing it in your pack?
Oh, it's hanging around my neck the entire time because I need it right there. I need it right there. And then if something cool happens, like I see a wild animal or something, I want a picture of that, right? So if it's strapped around my neck, it's right there and ready to go.
And we just started 2025. We still got plenty of time left for the remainder of the year. Are there any hiking or mountaineering goals you have for this year or maybe beyond 2025?
Okay, so I'm chipping away at completing the 13ers in Colorado. So there's about 584 of them, and I've summited all but 88. I usually summit about 125 to 150 peaks a year. That's just my normal schedule. So finishing them this year is a real possibility, depending on my work schedule and the weather. The only problem is that most of the peaks I have left are what we talked about before. They're really remote areas that can take days to get to. So it might realistically take another 2 years or so just for logistical reasons. But my goal is to chip away at the rest of the 13ers.
And I definitely recommend our listeners to go check out your Instagram feed because you share some beautiful pictures up at some of those summits and well worth the extra weight on packing that camera to take those beautiful pictures. Now, this last section of the podcast, Laura, is the this or that questions. For this season, we've updated the list, so there's a couple new ones. And right off the bat, we have a new one, and it's about trail snacks. Do you prefer a sweet or savory snack?
Okay, so I actually, with this one, I gotta say both. In my pack, I have dried mangoes, which are sweet, and I've got beef jerky with me when I hike. And that's pretty much all I have. Is the sweet and the salty. So the salty gets me to drink water, which is really important because when I'm hiking, I just don't get thirsty. I'm weird. I know that's not normal. I don't get thirsty, but I know I need to drink. So I'll do the beef jerky to get myself to drink, and then I'll reward myself with those dried mangoes.
And I think I know the answer to this one, but waterfalls or summits?
Yeah, definitely summits. Waterfalls are amazing, but for me, I'm a summit person. I'm a mountaineer.
And then when it comes to trail systems, especially mountaineering, would you prefer going up switchbacks or would you rather go straight up?
Okay, well, I would much prefer to go straight up, but if I'm under tree line, I tend to like the switchbacks because bushwhacking is not fun. So if there's switchbacks there for me to use, I'm taking those switchbacks. But once I'm above tree line, it's definitely just straight to the top.
And then our most controversial one, trek poles or freehand?
Okay, yeah, like I said before, trekking poles, especially if I'm hiking at night. If there's an animal out there or I hear an animal out there, I just whack that trekking pole on every tree and rock I find and it scares the animal away. And it's my first line of defense. So even if I don't need them to hike, it's a great tool to have for myself, my mental health to keep myself safe.
And then this one's about your footwear, trail runners or hiking boots?
Okay, I know a lot of people like trail runners, but I'm all up for hiking boots for the ankle support. I tend to have a pack that's 30 pounds or more and it's for ankle support. I gotta have my boots.
And then here's another trail system question for you. Do you prefer a loop trail or an out back trail?
Okay, since I'm putting together trip reports, and I think I mentioned before that I just start really early in the morning, I like the out and back just so I can make sure I get pictures of the entire route. I try to take pictures of the trailhead and all this other stuff. And when I start, I'm starting early in the morning in the dark, and it's really hard to get good pictures or pictures that are relevant to other people. So I would rather have an out and back if I'm doing a trip report. But if I'm just going on a hike, a loop is great.
And you've done both of these, but is there a preference when it comes to hiking if you're going to be doing a group hike or a solo adventure?
Yeah, I would have to say hands down solo, especially if it's my first time. I won't do a peak with other people if I've never done it before because I'm trying to solo everything first. I have no problem going on group hikes. I take group hikes all the time, obviously with scouting, and I take other organizations out, and it's great. There's a lot of other dynamics that come with that, and I find that when I'm solo, it's just so much more peaceful.
And then here's our two hardest questions, but sunset hikes or sunrise hikes?
Definitely sunrise for me. Obviously, I start early in the morning when it's dark, and that sunrise just gives me it gives me calm. Like, I know that the day is going to get better. And then in Colorado, our alpine sunrises are absolutely amazing. Just seeing the sun come over the mountains and the alpine glow and everything, you can't beat that. And then I get to hike down in the heat and the warmth. In Colorado, that's a big deal. I don't want to be hiking down in 10-degree weather. I'd much rather do it in 40-degree weather. So definitely sunrise hikes.
And this one's a tough one, especially there in Colorado, but spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Okay, for me personally, because I'm a mountaineer, it's got to be the fall colors. So most of my hikes are off trail. There's no trail to the summit. I got to figure it out. And I absolutely hate stepping on wildflowers. So I spend all my time in the spring making sure I'm not to get up to these peaks. And it's much easier just for me to hike in the fall and not worry about it because I don't want to damage the environment. I don't want to step on those flowers. And while I love seeing them, most of what I do is off trail, and I don't want to be responsible for harming those little guys.
And then this one, I'm interested in seeing what your response is, but steep climb or long distance?
You know what? I really like long distance. I don't get tired on long hikes. I can do 25 to 30 miles in a day, no problem. And I love it. And it just gives me more opportunity to see more. In a steep hike, it's great. You get there faster, but you're seeing the same thing the entire time. I just want to experience the adventure.
That was it, Laura, for the this or that questions. If folks want to follow your adventures here in 2025, where are some of the places both on social media and online that they can find not just your posts, but maybe even the trip reports?
Right, so I have a website, wildwanderertripreports.com, where I have hundreds of trip reports for hikes and peaks in Colorado and a lot of other peaks in other states, California, Hawaii, a lot of high points. Whenever I travel, whatever I do, I post the peaks there. My website is really best viewed in desktop mode because then you can see the search button and just search for what you're looking for, or tabs for ways to like buy my book or watch some short podcasts. They're like 5 to 7 minutes long on how to stay safe solo or how to train or how to avoid altitude sickness and stuff like that. And there's a contact button on there where you can write me and I'll answer any hiking related questions. And I always answer. It might take me a few days to get back to you because I'm often out of cell service when I'm in the mountains, but I promise that I will respond. Just don't ask me about a hike the night before you're going to do it because it's probably not going to work. And then on Instagram, I'm Laura_M_Clark. And I mostly post pictures of the mountain I just climbed, but I like to travel too. So sometimes there's pictures of my travel. I'm heading to South America in a couple months. So I hope to have some really cool pictures of my hiking there. And then I have my book, which is Wild Wanderer, Soloing Colorado's 200 Highest Peaks, which is available on my website and on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble.
And we'll be sure to link all three of those in the episode show notes so people can check it out. It has been an awesome time speaking with you and learning about your experiences there in Colorado and elsewhere. Thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking with you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Laura. We extend a heartfelt thanks to her for coming on the podcast. Make sure to follow her adventures on Instagram at Laura_M_Clark. Also, don't forget to check out the episode show notes to check out Laura's website and book. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the winter months, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday with occasional bonus episodes on Friday. To ensure you never miss out on these thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to check out our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by S09 Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursamineroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursamineroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.